All right. Okay. We can do this. I know we can do this. I can't, but we can. It's been almost 6 weeks since the Supreme Court listened to Donald Trump's attorney argue that ex-presidents have absolute immunity for any crimes they may have committed in the Oval Office. Trump's attorney even suggested that a president could order SEAL Team 6 to murder his political opponent, even stage a coup. And unless he was impeached and then convicted in the Senate, that president could not be subject to criminal prosecution after leaving office. Nobody in their right mind would rule in favor of this argument. But then again, nobody in their right mind would have overturned Roe, which is exactly what the court did 2 years ago, come June 24th. The Supreme Court is nearing the end of its term, and they still have yet to issue a ruling on presidential immunity. They still can't seem to make up their minds as to whether or not former presidents possess the divine rights of kings. The court just can't seem to decide. It's a slow and deliberative process. This has nothing to do with delaying Trump's criminal trials until after November. The court just wants to make sure they got it all right, and that takes time. On February 6th of this year, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments on whether the state of Colorado could scrub Donald Trump's name from the ballot in accordance with Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which disqualifies anyone from elective office if they once swore an oath to the Constitution and then engaged in an insurrection. Oral arguments on that one, well, those oral arguments were February 6th. And on March 4th of this year, less than a month after they heard oral arguments, the court came back with a decision that only Congress can enforce Section 3 of the 14th Amendment when it comes to federal office holders. They ruled Donald Trump's name must stay on the ballot. Now, that was actually a difficult decision. Seriously, it required the court to parse out the word office holders, what that really meant. They had to settle on the true intent of Section 3 and resolve age-old tensions between the federal government and states' rights. And yet they were able to come down with a ruling in fewer than 4 weeks. But on a much simpler question, can a president, after he leaves office, be tried in a criminal courtroom for murder or insurrection or leading a coup? On that question, which has already been resolved in Nixon versus Fitzgerald, 1982, the court just can't seem to make up its mind. They need to take their time and make sure they get it just right. Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito told Congress last week that he will not be recusing himself from the presidential immunity decision, or another case before the court where lawyers for several January 6ers are challenging the Justice Department's application of a statute that involves charging the defendants with preventing a government proceeding. The Supreme Court may throw out some convictions of the January 6ers. Now, as you all know by now, Justice Alito is being accused of showing solidarity with the January 6ers by flying the American flag upside down in the days leading up to Joe Biden's inauguration in 2020. Organizers of the Stop the Steal movement, even after the attempted insurrection of January 6, they urged supporters to signal their belief that the election was stolen by flying their American flag upside down. And because the Alitos flew their flag upside down before the inauguration, Many, including me, have insisted that Judge Alito recuse himself. But Judge Alito said, I had nothing to do with that flag outside my home. I didn't fly it upside down. My wife, Martha Ann, decided to fly the flag upside down. And I asked her not to, but she did it anyway. He said, I'm not making this up, Justice Alito said, I can't control my wife. He can't control his wife. The guy who overturned Roe can't control his wife. So instead, he decides to control every other woman in this country. Now, Martha Ann Alito has stayed out of the spotlight in the 2 decades since her husband has been on the court, and a lot of people, including me, I thought the worst of her. I saw the flag flying upside down, and I said on this show, she's just as bad as Clarence Thomas's wife, Ginny. I said the wife of the Supreme Court justice who is supposed to be impartial, the justice is supposed to be impartial, they have no right to fly a flag upside down in support of insurrectionists. And for saying that, I am truly sorry. I was wrong. I got it completely wrong. My apologies to Justice Alito and his wife, Martha Ann. Up until this morning, I had no idea what the real reason was for Martha Ann Alito flying her United States flag the way she did. But now I know. Martha Ann Alito was born with her head upside down. This is the only known picture of Martha Ann Alito, and you can see why. It's a horrible affliction. This is the only picture of Martha Ann Alito, and the woman clearly flew the flag upside down because she wanted to see it, and the only way she could appreciate the American flag was by flying it upside down because she was born with a head that is upside down, as opposed to Ginny Thomas, who was born with a head up her ass. Fix the Court is a nonprofit watchdog that tries to make the federal judiciary more accountable to the people. Yesterday, it came out with a report that says since January of 2004, Supreme Court justices accepted nearly $6.5 million in gifts from assorted millionaires and billionaires. Fix the Court says much of their calculations are based on the groundbreaking work of ProPublica, which uncovered Justice Alito's free fishing trips and flights, and of course, Clarence Thomas, who has accepted a boatload of freebies from right-wing donors who often have business before the court. Kathleen Quieton, I don't know if I'm pronouncing her last name properly, but Catherine Quieton over at Raw Story took the time to pore over Fix the Court's numbers. And she writes that Clarence Thomas's freebies and gifts come to $4,042,286. Of the $6.5 million worth of gifts that were given to the Supreme Court over a 20-year period, Clarence Thomas got a little more than $4 million. She then writes that if you take an even closer look at his disclosures, Clarence Thomas's share of gifts might actually come to $5,879,796. I'm in the wrong business. I should have been a Supreme Court justice. Clarence Thomas was nominated to the Supreme Court by President George Herbert Walker Bush after Thurgood Marshall announced his retirement, citing poor health. Thurgood Marshall was the first black person to sit on the Supreme Court. He was appointed by Lyndon Johnson in 1967, more than 100 years after the Civil War. It took more than 100 years after the Civil War to finally get a black judge on the Supreme Court. But it wasn't just any black judge. Thurgood Marshall in 1954 argued for the plaintiffs, the Browns, whose daughter was refused entry into the closest public school in Topeka, Kansas, because she was black. They forced her, because she was black, to take a bus to an all-black school miles away. Thurgood Marshall was an attorney for the NAACP, not a judge. He didn't decide Brown v. Board of Education. He won it. He won the landmark case that single-handedly put an end to separate but equal. And that decision, 70 years ago, this year, was supposed to put an end to school segregation. One could argue, however, America's public schools are as segregated as they were 70 years ago, and that would be because of people like Clarence Thomas, who was given Thurgood Marshall's seat. President George Herbert Walker Bush understood that Marshall's seat had to be filled by an African American. But George Herbert Walker Bush was a Republican, and he didn't like Thurgood Marshall. So he nominated Clarence Thomas, who has spent the past 30 years staining Thurgood Marshall's seat, trying to reverse everything Thurgood Marshall fought for, from the Voting Rights Act to affirmative action. Clarence Thomas got Thurgood Marshall's seat because he was black. And yet Thomas last year voted to get rid of affirmative action on college campuses, even though he admits he has been the beneficiary of affirmative action throughout his career, including getting accepted into Yale Law School. He says, I got into Yale Law School because of affirmative action. Clarence Thomas, a former Black Panther and a recipient of affirmative action, decided to reinvent both himself and American history. What makes this so abhorrent is Clarence Thomas sits in Thurgood Marshall's seat. This is the mop-up for June 7th, 2024. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you for finding me. Please like this episode so I remain in your feed. Share it with your friends by copying and then pasting the link to this episode in an email or in a text message or on social media. If you would like a free transcript of this or previous episodes, go to shopdavidfeldman.com. I post free transcripts over at shopdavidfeldman.com because some of my listeners are stupid enough to buy the garbage I'm selling there. You know, I ask you not to because it's just garbage and it's a bad look for me. It's not what I want to do. Horrible coffee mugs and T-shirts. It's going to be the end of me. Let me show you what a couple of my listeners did. They bought, how do I go big here? I just want to show you what they're doing to me to destroy this show. Can I go big here? Oh, come on. Here we go. So Father's Day, July 4th, Dad is going to do some barbecuing. Mom is going to do some barbecuing. So I made a chef's apron that says, hope you're in the mood for diarrhea. I didn't think anybody would actually buy a chef's apron that says, hope you're in the mood for, hope you're in the mood for diarrhea. And some people actually, some very deeply disturbed listeners of mine actually bought that apron. I've been thinking of doing live shows to meet the listeners in person. Now I'm afraid to. Now I don't want to meet any of you. Why would you buy that? Why would you do that to me? Why would you encourage me to go down this path? I'm trying to build a show of substance. My nephew Leonard wanted to be a Hollywood stuntman, but nobody would hire him because he has a fear of heights. He's my sister's son, and my sister, who I love, at least I say so publicly, she asked me if Leonard could help out on the show. So I said, actually, I need someone to run my store. Apparently, my sister thought I said, ruin my store. I gave Leonard, my nephew, I gave him my credit card, and I said, let's turn my listeners into walking billboards. Like, let's sell them shirts and coffee mugs, and they pay for the privilege of advertising my show. I thought I came up with a really smart idea, using my listeners. So I gave Leonard my credit card, and I said, print up David Feldman Show coffee mugs, hoodies, and T-shirts. Leonard took on the assignment, and now I have a warehouse filled with David Ferdman Show hoodies, David Ferdman Show coffee mugs, and David Ferdman Show T-shirts. And I politely pointed out to Leonard that it's Feldman, not Ferdman, and he says, how come you only complain? How come you don't thank me for getting the spelling of David and Show right? How come you only focus on Ferdman? Anyway, I'm asking my listeners to help out and buy some David Ferdman merch. I've asked you in the past. I've told you that I got to unload the David Ferdman merch. But what do you people do? Instead, you buy, I'm in the mood. I hope you're in the mood for diarrhea chef's aprons. Why are you against me? What have I ever done for you to... And my sister is mad at me because I hurt Leonard's feelings when I told him my last name is Feldman, not Ferdman. Some of you are actually buying my official Trump fart filtration mask. Don't leave home without it. I have one. He's been in town since the trial started. This is a Donald Trump. It's an official Donald Trump fart filtration mask. The last thing you want is to have your lungs scorched by one of Donald Trump's leaky quarter-pounder discharges. So go to Shop David Feldman and buy yourself, why is that blurry? Do I have glaucoma? An official Donald Trump fart filtration mask. It's what the pros wear. I have one. God, I hate myself. The chief financial officer of the far-right conservative newspaper Epoch Times was arrested in New York City, charged with money laundering nearly $70 million. The Epoch Times is owned by the religious group Falun Gong, which supports Donald Trump and is opposed to same-sex marriage, women getting jobs, and, of course, vaccines. According to federal prosecutors, Bill Guan, Epoch Times chief financial officer, took dirty money and ran it through the Epoch Times, which allowed the company to go from reporting revenue of $15 million a year suddenly to revenue of $62 million a year. That's what money laundering is. You take dirty money, run it through a business, you make the money clean, you make it look legitimate. Have you ever read the Epoch Times or Epoch Times? I mean, sure, their Ashley Babbitt hagiographies are kind of fun to read, but whenever I look at the Epoch Times, I go, there's no way they're making money. Who's buying this? It didn't make sense. And now you find out it's not supposed to make sense. It's a money laundering operation. As I've said before, everything is basically a money laundering operation. If you don't understand, like you walk around like you're working for a company and go, how do they make money? It's a money laundering operation. This show's a money laundering operation for the Gambino family. I just clean money for the Gambinos. Manhattan is just one big money laundering laundry mat. That's all it is. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the right-wing authoritarian strongman, was reelected for a third time this week, but his BJP party only won 240 seats. That's 32 seats shy of a majority, which means he has to form a coalition government with smaller regional parties. Spain's Socialist Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez says he will not resign after his wife has been ordered to appear in court next month on charges of influence peddling. He's a socialist, and Sanchez is biting back. He's accusing right-wing politicians of trying to tarnish his name right before elections are to be held this weekend for the European Parliament. Elon Musk's social media platform, X, formerly known as Twitter, announced that sexual expression is protected speech, and therefore users will now be allowed to upload videos that are adult in nature. In other words, Twitter is hemorrhaging cash, and he's turning it into Pornhub. Whenever I hop on my Twitter feed and bear witness to this hate-filled cesspool of misogyny, the first thing I always say to myself is, you know what's missing here? You know what would class this place up? You know what would make Twitter more inviting to women? Porn. That's what this place needs. Twitter needs porn. Do you think there'll be any revenge porn on Twitter? Alex Jones appears to be ready to sell InfoWars to pay off the $1.5 billion judgment against him after he was sued by the families of the victims of the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting, which Jones repeatedly called a false flag operation designed to drum up support for the government to take away our guns. He said it was all fake. He says these were crisis actors hired so that Obama can get an assault weapons ban passed. He lost. He defaulted on the defamation lawsuit, and Jones is negotiating. He offered the families $55 million. They rejected it. They want $1.5 billion, and they're accusing him of hiding money. Jones's attorneys have reportedly told the bankruptcy court that Jones is now prepared to sell everything he owns, including InfoWars, in order to pay the families. Jones talked about losing ownership of InfoWars on his show earlier in the week, and he began to cry and blamed the deep state. Yes, the deep state of mental and moral decrepitude. Donald Trump is vetting vice presidential candidates, and Florida Congressman Byron Donalds wants to be on Trump's list of running mates. So on Tuesday, Byron Donalds, a Florida congressman, was speaking before a crowd at an event called Cognac and Cigars, held inside Philadelphia's Cigar Code. I guess it's a cigar bar in Philadelphia. And Donalds, during this meetup, told the audience that black families were stronger under Jim Crow than they are now. Byron Donalds may not have a problem with Jim Crow, but he's obviously got a serious problem with Jim Beam. What is wrong with this man? How do you say something like that? Democrat Fentress Driscoll is minority leader in the Florida House of Representatives. She said of Byron Donalds' statement, quote, "This is disgraceful. Misrepresenting history has become a cornerstone of the Republican platform. We must fight back against this extremism at every turn. There was nothing positive about Jim Crow. Period. Full stop. Jim Crow laws relegated black Americans to second-class status. mandated black disenfranchisement and sanctioned the abuse, torture, and murder of black people. It's shameful to see this dark period in our history romanticized in an effort to score cheap political points. That would be Democrat Fentrice Driscoll, minority leader in the Florida State House of Representatives. You might remember South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. He's black too. Before declaring his candidacy for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination, he said, after one of Joe Biden's State of the Unions, that America is not a racist country. Tim, America may not be a racist country, but your party is, and the nominee of your party is, and practically everybody who votes for your party is a racist. Tim Scott, who also hopes to be on Trump's short list of running mates, has become the GOP's point man in getting more black people to vote Republican. They're not voting for Donald Trump, Tim. Tim Scott said that Trump's 4 criminal trials resonate with black voters because it reminds them of how unfair our nation's two-tier justice system is. Yes, the two-tier justice system that Donald Trump is such a victim of. That's why his RICO trial down in Georgia on Wednesday got delayed indefinitely, because he's the victim of America's two-tier justice system. I mean, what black voter can't relate to Donald Trump's legal problems? The judges threatening to lock him up because his supporters keep threatening to kill the witnesses and the jurors, and the judges, the way those judges treat, the way they keep threatening to lock him up. I mean, what black American can't relate to the way Donald Trump is being treated by these judges? Steve Bannon has been ordered to report to prison on July 1st. That would be July 1st. Bannon was found guilty of contempt of Congress after he refused a subpoena from the January 6th committee. Peter Navarro, Trump's White House economic advisor, is currently serving an identical 4-month sentence. He was found guilty of contempt of Congress for refusing his January 6th committee subpoena, and he's not having a good time in prison. I'm all for prison reform, but not when it comes to Steve Bannon or Navarro. You might remember Steve Bannon was convicted back in October of 2022 of contempt of Congress. His lawyers tied it all up in the appeals process, but the judge in the case decided enough was enough and said yesterday, your client is free to appeal, but he'll be doing it behind bars for 4 months starting July 1st. Bannon was pardoned by Donald Trump after Bannon was indicted for defrauding donors to a charity he set up to build a wall along the Mexican border. He ended up defrauding veterans. He took money from veterans, allegedly, but Trump pardoned him. So in November 2022, New York City District Attorney Alvin Bragg and New York State Attorney General Letitia James indicted Bannon, charging him for the same exact crime that Trump pardoned him for. Trump's pardon powers only extend to federal convictions, not states. Kenneth Chesebro, the Harvard Law School graduate who penned the key memos outlining how Republican officials in swing states could put together A slate of phony Trump electors, even though Trump lost the popular vote in those states. Kenneth Chesebro has now been indicted once again, this time in Wisconsin, his home state. Chesebro, and who doesn't love cheese in Wisconsin, Chesebro has been charged with 1 count of forgery and will be arraigned in September. Chesebro was indicted in the Fulton County, Georgia RICO trial, where he pled guilty. And of course, that's been put on hold until after November and indefinitely because Trump's lawyers are appealing. Oh, this two-tiered justice system. This is why black people are going to vote for Trump. They can relate to him. Meanwhile, Trump's White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, one of the founding members of the Freedom Caucus, is scheduled to plead not guilty today after he, along with Rudy Giuliani and several other Arizona Republican lawmakers, were indicted back in April for their role in Arizona's false elector scheme. Donald Trump was named as an unindicted co-conspirator in that Arizona lawsuit. So far, attorney generals in 5 swing states have brought charges against Trump's allies for their role in the false elector schemes. Wisconsin, as I just said, indicted Chesebro. Arizona has indicted 18 Republicans. The Georgia RICO trial includes indictments for the false elector scheme. Michigan indicted 16 Republicans for their part in the false elector scheme. And Nevada has indicted 6, including the current state Republican Party chairman. He's indicted. He hasn't resigned. It's one of the reasons Trump is going to lose Nevada. The state Republican Party there is broke, paying legal fees. So that's good. This is the mop-up for June 7th, 2024. I'm David Feldman. Thank you for finding me. Please like this episode so I remain in your feed. Subscribe to my newsletter and, of course, this channel. And please copy and paste the link to this episode and share it on social media, in an email, or in a text. That's the best way to help me. June 27th is the CNN debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. I'm hosting a watch party. It looks like we're going to do it. It's going to be a private affair on Zoom. I hope you can make it. I'll tell you more about it in the coming days. It will be kind of like the way I used to do office hours before that fell apart. We'll watch the debate and then we'll discuss. It will be an opportunity for me to meet some of my listeners. I look forward to that. I miss office hours. This is the Appeal to Heaven flag that flew over Justice Sam Alito's vacation home last summer. It's the same flag that was carried into the Capitol on January 6 by the insurrectionists, and it's the same flag that stands outside Speaker Mike Johnson's office door. An Appeal to Heaven flag symbolizes the teaching of apostolic preacher Dutch Sheets, who insists Christians have a responsibility to conquer the 7 mountains of society because America is a white Christian nation. That's what an Appeal to Heaven flag symbolizes, the belief that America is a white Christian nation. That's why I'm selling a flag that says, an appeal to these nuts. Isn't she a beauty? It comes with a pole so you can wave it at a Trump rally or in front of the Supreme Court or at your local school board meeting. Go to shopdavidfeldman.com and buy an Appeal to These Nuts flag. Fly it proudly over your vacation home. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the former head of the U.S. National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, testified before the House Oversight Committee on Monday. During the hearings, an infectious disease by the name of Marjorie Taylor Greene said Dr. Fauci should be tried for crimes against humanity for shutting down our economy and only, allowing Just 1 million Americans to die from COVID? 1 million Americans died from COVID, you moron, Marjorie Taylor Greene. If he didn't shut down the economy, it would have been 2 million. So after Marjorie Taylor Greene launched her tirade on Monday, Dr. Fauci reported more death threats to his home. More death threats. During his testimony, Dr. Fauci said he, his wife, and daughters are constantly receiving death threats, which requires private security around the clock. During his testimony, Dr. Fauci said he worried that the constant death threats he's subjected to will discourage good and decent members of the medical community from coming to work in Washington. That's the entire point of the death threats. Marjorie Taylor Greene, after Monday's hearings, took exception to Congressman Jamie Raskin, the Democrat, accusing her and House Republicans of worshiping Donald Trump. Marjorie, after the hearings, took umbrage. She told reporters that there's only one person she worships, and she used her finest Sunday school words to tell us who that is.
Raskin is in there saying we worship him. Excuse me, let me correct you, and this is really important. I don't worship, I worship God. God. And Jesus is my savior. I don't worship President Trump. And I'm really sick and tired of the bullshit annex I have to deal with constantly from the Democrats.
What a good, she just drips Christianity. It's like she's possessed by Jesus. Then the devout Christian, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has gone on record saying she believes the Jews killed Jesus. Not that, maybe the Pharisees, a Jewish sect, might have played a role in encouraging the Romans to crucify Jesus, according maybe to the gospel. No, she insists the Jews killed Jesus. That's what she says. All the Jews kill Jesus. I guess that would include Jesus and his disciples as well. They killed Jesus. Effing anti-Semitic, homophobic Marjorie Taylor Greene. Racist. Here she is spewing hatred towards black people. She's in a deep red district in Georgia that's like 80% white. And, she is no longer hiding. She never did hide her racism, but I'm just going to show you what these people this is why Marjorie Taylor Greene is valuable, because she is the Republican Party. She just doesn't filter herself, but this is what they believe. Here she is complaining about Jamie Raskin, accusing her of worshiping Donald Trump.
We have Jamie Raskin in there accusing us of worshiping Trump, worshiping as a convicted felon. He is a convicted well, yeah, so is George Floyd. And everybody, and you all too, the media worship George Floyd. Democrats worship George Floyd. There were riots burning down the fucking country over George Floyd.
Okay, this is who she is saying what the Republicans truly believe, okay? Let's just listen to that again. Pardon the language. This is why I don't curse. This is, if we have any young people listening, cursing is the last vestige of morons. If you're smart, you can find better words. Go ahead, you racist, anti-Semitic, homophobic pig, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Go ahead.
We have Jamie Raskin in there accusing us of worshiping Trump, worshiping as a convicted felon. He is a convicted well, yeah, so is George Floyd. And everybody, and you all too, the media worship George Floyd. Democrats worship George Floyd. There were riots burning down the fucking country over George Floyd.
You are a racist. That is unadulterated racism. No dog whistles, Marjorie. You are a racist. And that's why you are Donald Trump's opening act at at all his rallies because you are a racist. Nobody was worshiping George Floyd in 2020. Americans were protesting his killing by police officer Derek Chauvin, who, by the way, was sentenced to 22 and a half years in prison for the murder of George Floyd, after he killed George Floyd by kneeling on his neck for 9 minutes while Floyd's arms were tied behind his back as he kept screaming, "I can't breathe." That's why Derek Chauvin was found guilty of second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. You racist pig, Marjorie Taylor Greene. You are a racist pig. Do you have a problem with Derek Chauvin's conviction, Marjorie Taylor Greene? Do you think he's innocent? Of course you do, because you're a racist pig. You're an anti-Semitic, homophobic, racist pig who harassed Congressman Newman for having a transgender daughter. Congressman Newman was on this show, and Marjorie Taylor Greene was harassing the Congresswoman for having a transgender daughter. Well, let's clear some stuff up. I do this every 6 months because the Republicans keep repeating the lie that Black Lives Matter protesters were violent. They weren't. Kyle Rittenhouse was violent. The white idiot who brought an AR-15 to Kenosha, Wisconsin, and killed 2 Black Lives Matter protesters and injured 1. The Black Lives Matter protesters were peaceful, nonviolent. But don't go by me. Let's read the Washington Post. This is from Erica Chenoweth and Jeremy Pressman, October 16th, 2020. Washington Post. This summer's Black Lives Matter protesters were overwhelmingly peaceful. Our research finds police and counter-protesters sometimes started the violence. Gee, you think? Who do you think burnt down the police precinct in Minnesota? It was a white guy. And they were allegedly, the police were destroying evidence. This is from Time Magazine. This is Sonia Mansour, September 5th, 2020. The vast majority of Black Lives Matter protests, more than 93%, have been peaceful, according to a new report published Thursday by a nonprofit that researches political violence and protests across the world. The Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project analyzed more than 7,750 Black Lives Matter demonstrations in all 50 states and Washington, D.C. that took place in the wake of George Floyd's death between May 26 and August 22nd. The Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, ACLED, you should go to that website. It is a serious NGO that does great work covering violence around the world. Okay, more from Time Magazine. The ACLED report includes protests toppling statues of colonial figures, slave owners, and Confederate leaders as violent incidents. Since Floyd's killing, there have been at least 38 incidents in which demonstrators have significantly damaged or torn down memorials around the country, the report says. So when they say 93% of the protests have been peaceful, what they count as violence is the tearing down of Confederate statues. there was not a single Black Lives Matter person, protester, who shot anybody, and no cops were injured by Black Lives Matter protesters. Fox News, Republicans love to talk about how the cops were injured by Black Lives Matter protesters. Every study, read the New York Times, every violent act at a Black Lives Matter protest was instigated by the police. Tens of millions of dollars have been paid out to protesters for the damages that the police did to the Black Lives Matter protesters. They were driving their cars into the protesters. This is from the Milwaukee Independent. Let me find this. Get a screen grab and share this. This is from the Milwaukee Independent from 2020. Pay attention to this. 25 active duty law enforcement officers have been shot and killed around the country so far this year. That would be 2020. 6 of those have occurred since the George Floyd protests began, but none have been directly related to the protests. Last year, 48 officers were shot and killed across the country. In 2018, 52 officers were shot and killed in the line of duty. That is an average of 1 officer each week over the past several years. Okay? No police officers were shot by any Black Lives Matter protesters. No police officers were killed by any Black Lives Matter protesters. Counter-protesters created violence, did the looting. And that's the real false flag operation that Alex Jones wouldn't dare talk about. Right? The agent provocateurs. This is the Washington Post. Again, different article. Given that protesters were objecting to extrajudicial police killings of Black citizens, protesters displayed an extraordinary level of nonviolent discipline, particularly for a campaign involving hundreds of documented incidents of apparent police brutality. The protests were extraordinarily nonviolent and extraordinarily non-destructive, given the unprecedented size of the movement's participation and geographic scope. So when Tim Scott says, I'm going to be the point man for the Republicans to get the Black vote out, talk about the Black Lives Matter protests, Tim Scott. Black people know how the police behaved in 2020. Black people know exactly how the police behave all the time vis-a-vis Black people. You want the Black vote to go into the Republican column? There's no way Black people are going to vote for Republicans who believe this.
We have Jamie Raskin in there accusing us of worshiping Trump, worshiping as a convicted felon. He is convicted. Well, yeah, so is George Floyd. And everybody, and you all too, the media worship George Floyd. Democrats worship George Floyd. There were riots burning down the fucking country over George Floyd.
Okay. Tim Scott, you want to respond to what Marjorie Taylor Greene said about George Floyd as you go out and court the Black vote? This is the mop-up for June 7th, 2024. I'm David Feldman. If you would like a transcript of this show or previous episodes, they're free. Go to shopdavidfeldman.com. The transcripts are possible because of idiot listeners who buy stupid crap like this. I have a Made in Los Estados Unidos coffee mug that I'm actually, I like that. Made in Los Estados Unidos coffee mug. My youngest son came up with this coffee mug idea. I love this. He has a joke, my youngest son. Why do I pee out my penis but don't poo out my poonis? And I think that's a brilliant joke. I do. I think that's for a kid. Well, he's not a kid anymore, but I think that's a great joke. Why do I pee out my penis but don't poo out my poonis? And he said, why don't you get a picture of Socrates and attribute the quote to Socrates? So over at shopdavidfeldman.com, I'm having way too much fun. This is, if you want insight into how sick I am and what I really think, this obsession now, like, nobody's going to buy this crap, but I just think it's funny to put that somebody would put this on a coffee. Why do I pee out my penis but don't poo out my poonis? Socrates. It's one of the questions, one of the great questions. My son came up with that. Also, we have sit on Rudy Giuliani's face throw pillows. I'm not making this up. We have... I've been depressed. I've just been depressed. So forgive me, but I actually made sit on Rudy Giuliani's face throw pillows, and I think these really accent a room. Aren't they beautiful? Those are actual throw pillows, and you can sit on Rudy Giuliani's face. Are we done? I think we are. Oh my God. Okay. What can I tell you? I will probably do a show Saturday night. And thank you for listening. I got to stop with this store. This is going to be my downfall. Just sitting and designing these things that nobody's ever going to buy. And it's off-brand. It's childish. I mean, my sons, come on. Yes, it's funny. Why do I pee out my penis but don't poo out my poonis? Socrates. But the world is collapsing. And I'm doing this. Something is seriously wrong with me. Thank you to Bob in the chat room who keeps the conversation civilized. Let me check before I go. Okay. Thank you, everybody. I will see you maybe Saturday night.